All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of Spirituality, Personal Paths, and Self-Discovery in Certain Times. I'm Matthew Butcher with rightpaths.com, and Alex Yoel is here again from spiritbloomhealing.com. We've gotten some good feedback since last time, and we were proposed a couple questions by some of y'all who are watching. The questions that we're going to talk a little bit about today is what has our personal experience been with the role of diet in healing? And then why do some issues resolve with energy work and others don't or might take time? So again, we just want to do a little disclaimer first. Neither of us are medical professionals or licensed. We're going to be talking from our personal firsthand experience with healing over the years and our own personal journey. And just again, none of this is medical advice, and anything we talk about, feel free to do your own research and look deeper into, because we have it that you're probably going to be the best authority on yourself. Anything you want to add to that, Alex?
No, that's a perfect roll into diet as topic number one, and I think it's something that so many people think about, and even in the Western medical tradition, in the Western world, number one thing you think of when you think about health is your diet, right? And there seems to be a template for what's healthy and what's not healthy that's sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken. Generally, vegetables are good, fat is bad, carbs are bad, and there are these big, broad labels. But I think it tends to be more subtle and subjective than that. And there was a lot of ancient science like Ayurveda on that, which is kind of dietarily what I subscribe to. It's about knowing your own body, knowing what you need, and knowing that everything you put into your body is something that your body should be asking for. That's sort of my core tenet. And I've done a couple self experiments where I'll fast for not that long. If you hear some people do 7-day fasts, I think that's insane. But I'll fast.
I won't tell you how long I did that.
Oh no. Yeah, I can't do it. I need my fuel. But I'll not eat breakfast and lunch and then have one meal later in the day, and I'll say, what does my body really want? Does my body really want carbs? Does my body really want protein? And I'll eat one thing at a time and see how my energy responds to that. If I eat a piece of meat and my body says yay, you can really tell how your body's responding if you turn off those receptors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because I think normally you assemble a meal and then you eat the meal, but you don't think about the individual components.
Yeah, it's been interesting. My personal experience with diet, my spiritual path, and kind of going through different health challenges, it's always kind of varied depending on what's going on. When I first started working with ayahuasca, is during the first years, I felt very called to do an extended juice cleanse. I was just drinking liquids for a month and a half until my body was all right, you're good and clear now. And when I was doing ceremony at the time, while I was doing the juice cleanses, things felt very clean, very accelerated, and I was kind of it was very easy to, I guess, quote unquote, travel in the astral or get the visions and experience stuff like that. So it's always varied depending on what my needs are. If I'm sick, or if I'm battling Lyme, like I was for the last couple of years, among other things. And like you spoke about, Ayurveda has been a very wonderful tool that's in the toolkit for healing, and just kind of my own personal advancement to help detox myself and kind of clean out any sort of stagnation that doesn't belong there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess that's the short version. Is what's your personal firsthand experience with any of that?
So I have seen some tremendous shifts from diet in certain phases, and I've seen certain phases where it doesn't seem to matter what I eat. Mm-hmm. For me, I tend to observe that it's really subjective. What is it that the essence wants me to deal with at this time? And when food comes into play, well, you can think about the symbology behind the digestive system. It's about discriminating about what you're going to take in and what you're going to keep. I had a client mention to me the other day that that the body treats the inside of the digestive tract as separate from the body, right? It's completely self-contained. It's technically all foreign materials passing through and then
Yep.
leaving, and it never really is in your body. It's never really part of your body. So it's really about, if you have digestive trouble, it's really about, what am I allowing into my life? What am I allowing into my experience emotionally, personally, spiritually? Who am I spending my time with? Am I allowing myself to spend tons of time with people that really do not treat me well, right? And I had issues with that a lot earlier in life, and those were some of my biggest lessons, in the teenage and early 20 years. I really had never picked and choose. And what's my number one physical complaint is digestion, bloating, carrying weight, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really important to think about that when you put something into your body. What are you putting into your body? And not just, based on an intellectual system, an intellectual structure of, I know this has this vitamin, I know this has this nutrient, but what does this food represent? Does this food feel healthy to me? Does this food feel unhealthy to me? Am I doing something eating something that I identify as unhealthy because I don't think of myself as a healthy person, right? So there's a whole layer of that for me that has been really important in using diet to heal.
I like what you spoke about, like in terms of comparing what we're taking into our bodies in comparison to like the energies that we're allowing into our lives, like whether it's people, media, and everything else. It's like selective. Is this something that's nourishing me? Is this something that's draining me? Does it actually have a benefit, or is it just because like it's a comfort food from when I was a child and I'm triggered and I am seeking that comfort at this particular time?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an interesting insight from a shamanic healer about a week and a half ago, which I had identified in the past through my own guidance, that my power animal is a whale.
Mm-hmm.
And when you Google power animal of whale, whatever, like, everything just says like wisdom. It's all really like general seeming, but to have someone with experience actually tell me the message of the whale was very interesting. And you know what he said to me? He said, "How does the whale eat? The whale opens his mouth, takes everything in, and then spits out what he doesn't need." Right. And that's such a major lesson for me, and it's like, having the bravery to take on what comes rather than trying to pre-select. And so
Mm-hmm.
take it on and then just discard it, because you have the ability and the power to discard it if you don't need it. Right. So that was just an interesting thing that ties into the digestion and food and all of that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's especially with like medicines or herbs, in terms of like Chinese medicine and like some of the legends as to like how the medicines were discovered and like their properties were discovered. Is like you taste them and then like see is like what are the properties and like what are the qualities of this? Is this something that I need at this time? Is it something that actually helps me? And if it doesn't, like be okay with like letting it go, but still having the courage to try something.
Mhm.
So it's like it applies to multiple areas, not just diet, but like in terms of health is like, yeah, actually kind of approaching it from a little bit of a, like a scientific mind, like trial and error. Is like, does this benefit me? What's the results if I like do X for so long?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's really, I guess, about attentiveness, ultimately, and really, really listening to your body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and everyone who heals is obsessed with this idea of the consciousness of matter, and every cell in your body has an opinion, right? Every cell in your body has thought and ability to have cognition on some level or other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you really, really want to know what you need, you just ask. You can, and you can mentally channel it that way. You can ask, you have a stomach cramp and you can say, well, was it something I ate? And if you learn to really listen and to get yourself out of the way and listen as if that were a separate entity or a separate being, even though it is part of you, you get really clear answers. You get really clear answers. And that's one way to bring that into fruition. is to frame it in a conversational way. If you're can't help yourself and you talk all the time like I do. But if if you're not as talkative a person, and you can use your own consciousness in a way that whatever helps you get that answer, but the answer will be there in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Now, there have been I know for myself is I've had periods in my life where it's I felt the need to do extended fast, and then go vegan for a while, and then vegetarian, and then back to omnivore. Have you experimented or done any of those kind of labels in terms of diet over the years during different stages?
I actually haven't too much. I did one complete overhaul nutritional program, which was follow these specific rules for a pretty extended period. It's called nutritional balancing. And it's actually very, 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 very controlled. You send in hair samples where it's the most recent growth of hair on the back of your neck or your head, and whatever, and they do a hair mineral analysis test and send you a report on here's what you're detoxing based on your hair. Here's what your internal calcium levels are, and they measure just tons of nutrients and elements, and they test for toxic metals that you're dumping and all that. And so then there's a supplement regimen and then a diet, and the diet is based on what they determine your oxidation rate to be based on what they see in the hair mineral analysis test. And it was really compelling how much information can come together in calculating the proportions of what you need. But it was so hard to follow because it was so complicated. And I like getting into a high level of depth of understanding in order to find the simple answers, right? So that didn't end up being the right thing for me. But I haven't tried keto, for example. I haven't tried, an omnivore diet or a vegan diet or any of those things. I tend to test in shorter ranges. So I'll try eating more of this thing or less of that thing, and it's always on my mind. But what I do now, is basically I follow Ayurveda for my dosha, which is Vata, and I don't track the changes in what I need, week to week, and what's elevated and what's not. Particularly now because going to the grocery store is scary. So changing your diet that frequently is just harder. But I stick to kind of core Vata diet. I healthy animal fats, grains, and kind of dense, nutritious, simple meals. And I've found actually that brings me into balance so much more because than anything really. I mean, it's like the simplest diet. It's pretty cheap because it's just grains and some meat sometimes and some fat and a vegetable or and certain spices in small quantities. But I find that my body gets overwhelmed really easily, and I never knew that until I stripped my diet down to something that's simple. And I'm Armenian, so I grew up with tons of spices in the food. Nowadays, when I put tons of spice in my food, no matter how much I eat and how dense it is, my blood sugar crashes, and my blood pressure crashes. So knowing that my body is the kind of body that needs just nourishment, energy, because it burns through that energy really quickly. That is a central idea in Ayurveda has been so helpful for me.
So I'm curious, since you've been applying these principles, what would you say you've noticed benefit wise, what shifted for you?
Just way more consistency, way more consistency. It's just, I used to peak and crash a lot. I would get really amped up and then crash, and I would think, oh, there's pollen coming out or something, right? And that's really affecting. And maybe that was part of it, but I'm far less affected by that stuff now. And I actually have lost some weight because I need to eat less, right? I don't need to eat 4 big meals a day to get the nutrients because I'm not eating the things that slow down my digestion, because my digestion needs to just get energy, that's what I need. I need energy,
Yeah.
and I cover my nutritional bases with, high quality salts, a little bit of spices, a good amount of variety. I do take like Chyavanprash, which is a jam in Ayurveda that is a really energy giving and immune boosting thing. And so I take small amounts of various things that give me the trace minerals and nutrients that are necessary for your body to function right. But largely I focus on just give me some energy. And that could be a phase too for what I'm in right now. My body could need that now, and then when it gets to a certain level of health, then what I need could shift. Thinking on your feet is like very, very important too, because not getting stuck in habits.
Yeah, I want to just like comment on what you're talking about with like the trace minerals. That's been something that I started working with a little bit, I guess, early 2019, on and off a little bit before that, but like actually seriously looking at it because like in graduate school we've had a couple of nutrition classes, and then I've done some research myself and just started experimenting with like what happens if I start actually getting these trace minerals, like magnesium, boron, and some of the other ones that unfortunately we don't get as much of as we need to because the soil is depleted, so it's not as much in the food. um, and so just experimenting with that, because it's like with those minerals, the way I see it is like we're like bioelectric batteries, and if we don't have those minerals, like our nervous system isn't going to be able to fire as smooth. Like we might not necessarily be able to relax as much as we could because we're lacking the magnesium. We might have more cramps and body aches because of that. So just kind of like experimenting with like getting to, I guess, the bodily load of that, and then backing off and kind of like cycling with it, because it's just been, for me, it's kind of just noticing like sleeping better energy during the day, feeling a little bit clearer. And like that's something that's just such a simple add-on that so many people can do, that I feel like I hope everybody here, like if they don't know about like magnesium deficiency and like trace mineral deficiency, would take some time to do some research, because it could just be like a transformational thing that's super easy without changing your entire diet.
Have you entered into or researched the world of like muscle testing for what nutrients you need? Have you done any of that?
Um, Muscle testing, no. I've worked with like one of, I guess, one of my old mentors who is an acupuncturist. He also did a lot of muscle testing. So like exposed me to muscle testing, but I'm not super familiar with it.
It's a really simple tool because it is a pretty wide ranging world of, if you want to really be concerted about it, you need to know a lot. And a lot of people who are into healing love doing that research and just really enjoy that learning. But for people that don't want to go that in depth, this could be a good tool. I'll take so I have like a supplement tower here with, these are all mineral supplements. So for example, here's one which is magnesium and calcium, and you can hold that in your hand and you can test the strength of your arm, right? So you could say, okay, give me a positive response, and then it's strong. And you can say, give me a negative response, and then the muscle is weaker. And so then you just hold this in your hand and you say, okay, I need this right now, and I get a strong response. So, maybe I need some extra magnesium or calcium. So I do that. And it's just a really interesting thing that I didn't know existed until maybe like a year ago. And yeah, just wanted to share that because it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I was showing is like in terms of like muscle testing, what we need, do you feel like it's sometimes better to have someone else do like the pressure on you, especially in the beginning, just so you can actually maybe like develop the awareness as to like what's an authentic yes and a no?
Yeah, it takes practice for sure. One of the energy healing systems that I have learned, it's called the body code. The emotion code's level 1 and the body code's level 2. And actually what you do is you establish a connection. So I could actually muscle test for you from here if I channeled that intention. So you establish that kind of spiritual energetic connection with another person. And then you muscle test, say you had a stomach cramp, you muscle test, what's the underlying reason for this stomach cramp? And you can follow flow charts, and there are certain energetic causes. It could say parasites. It could say magnesium deficiency. So that was the second system of energy work that I learned. And I just got a ton of muscle testing experience doing that. I mean, I do it with one hand. I do it in really simply now. So instead of picking that up, if I'm doing this for myself, instead of going through the trouble of picking it up, putting it in my hand and testing my arm, I just ask, this is a strong response. I'm using my thumb to test my index finger. This is a weak response. This is a strong response. Could my body benefit from that supplement right now? And if I get a strong response, then I know what that means. So I could do it that fluidly because I've done it. I've probably muscle tested like over 10,000 things over the past year.
Yeah.
And I use it to confirm messages, guided messages. If I ask, what do I do about this situation, and I get a notion right from my guides, and then I could say, do you mean this? And then I get more specific, and then I can get a yes or no answers, and then get to pretty specific information that way too, not just the type. So, but definitely practicing muscle testing is sort of a must for using it fluidly, and someone else doing the muscle testing on you. If you just want quicker answers, could be without developing a huge skill set in that. It could be very helpful.
Yeah, one thing that I've done, like not necessarily in relation to muscle testing, but just like to bring it kind of a little bit back to like role of diet and healing, is having a little bit of a food journal. I know it's kind of like simple and basic, but to really be able to this is like more for the audience, not just like being able to track a correlation to like when you're eating something and paying attention to how you're feeling that day and then the day after, because it doesn't necessarily hit you right away, and it might take a while for like the effects of a particular food to affect you. So it's like the day after, maybe notice like, oh, if let's say I ate a whole bunch of dairy, do my joints start to ache? Am I like feeling more mucusy? Am I like experiencing mental fogginess and the like? Or it's like if you're eating something else and like you feel great and amazing the next day and just like super clear, just like I think that's one recommendation that I just want to put out there, because otherwise we're just kind of like guessing and like shooting in the dark. So, but sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of like a food journal to notice like what's actually going on, because we're all human. Sometimes we forget, or like we might remember something differently than it was.
Yeah. It's been said by, again, the same shamanic healer told me this. He said, always journal. If you do a dream journey or anything like that, or if you do anything you want to remember, just write it down, because it's like 10 minutes after you're done with a healing session, for example, you remember 90% of what happened. A week later, you remember less than 10%, right? So you don't really connect in that way, and the memories change too. That's really been demonstrated just super concretely in studies. Your memory of the past. I mean, you could have major memories from your childhood that are wrong. One of our teachers, actually, we didn't have this class together. I don't know if you had this teacher, but he used to talk about how he remembered his brother almost dying in childhood. It was like a major thing. It was a drowning incident or something. And he remembered, my brother almost died when I was 10 years old. But it was he that almost died when he was 10 years old. It happened to him, and his memory warped it to be that it happened to his brother, because he blocked out that experience.
Oh, wow. I don't remember that.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, you writing down the words don't move around on the page like your memories move around.
Mm-hmm.
It's this is a tangential point, but it's something that I've really been connecting with recently, in my own, just going through my past. We were talking a little bit about this, how I've been, going through and imagining situations that had emotional intensity in them in my past, in order to help resolve those feelings that are still affecting me today, that are still stored, because they store in your body and they affect your physical health. So I've been doing that, And actually, the warping of the memory, I don't know if what I'm remembering is physically, literally what happened. But I think the memory warps in such a way that that your subjective experience never changes. So if you feel a certain way and a certain thing happened, you might be remembering it in a way that punctuates what you were feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also important to explore that. It's almost like a half dreaming. It's like conscious dreaming, where you when you go back and explore your memories. But that has that can have a really big impact on the whole picture of your health as well.
Yeah.
A lot because a lot of we're talking about food, so we'll tie it to digestion, but a lot of feelings, your more intense feelings you feel in your gut. You feel butterflies in your stomach, you feel rage, you feel whatever it is. And that rage imprint doesn't go away, that jealousy imprint doesn't go away, but the facts of what brought up that feeling might change. So for your own subjective healing, it doesn't matter if the facts are right. It matters that you get in touch with that feeling.
Yeah, that brings up the point for like, so every year I try to do maybe like at the change of the seasons, maybe like 2 Kitchery cleanses each year. And the first couple ones that I did, I noticed for myself is like as I was going through the process of like cleansing and then losing weight, different emotions and feelings would actually like arise as like for me, like what I understand now is like the body and the tissue releasing the stored emotions and the feelings that may have been held in the fat cells or just like in the nervous system. Because as we go through those cleanses, is like sometimes it's not necessarily comfortable. So it's like these emotions can be brought back up, and it's for me it just generated the awareness is like how sometimes food and what we're eating can also like color the emotion and also be used to kind of like maybe like avoid looking at something that might be uncomfortable or difficult.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. And I mean, it happens with acupuncture too. I think it's had tons of people just cry and cry and cry and cry and cry for like hours after their first acupuncture session. Happened to my wife. Her first, she had acupuncture in the past, but not since like her early 20s when she was in China. And then
Mm-hmm.
she went for her first session in, like 8 to 10 years later. This was a couple of years ago. And yeah, I mean, it was like up on 57th Street, and we live in Brooklyn, and she was just like completely emotionally overwhelmed, and just in the subway on the way back. It was really powerful. I mean, it was really powerful. So the physical can get you in touch with those things.
Yeah.
Um, Another example of that, again, shamanism, because that's just my kind of area of study right now. But they do, and I did one last night. They do candle readings where you take a candle and you rub it all over your body and really try to like imprint the candle with whatever it is, whatever tensions and whatever pains that you're not consciously aware of, just whatever you're feeling. And then
Mm-hmm.
you burn the candle, and you can read the candle, and it'll give you information if you learn the methods of candle reading, but it also burns those energies away. Um, so last night I did. Yeah, it's really cool and it's really simple. Um, some people do it every day. You can carry a candle in your pocket all day, and whatever you're absorbing and feeling through the day, and then just burn it off at the end of the day. Um,
I like it. It's nice and simple and like pretty passive too.
exactly, and the candle interpretation methods are really simple too. You it's kind of like a little kind of like how in reflexology the head is at the top and the lower portions is at the bottom. It's the same thing with the candle, and you can read your aura, your energetic health by looking at the areas around the flame to
Mm.
see if you're energetically healthy. Um, so there's a lot of information on how to do that, but you can get information. But while this candle was burning last night, I just like this. That was really what sparked a lot of these deep pushes for emotional release that I was talking about earlier. And I was planning on watching that new show Tales from the Loop on Amazon Prime. I wasn't planning on doing a bunch of just sitting down and thinking about my feelings, but
Yeah.
it was so present while that candle was burning. It was pretty powerful. So
Gotcha.
there are a lot of things that can trigger that, and there's just a lot of symbology and a lot of things that really ties into what were our personal experiences on a subconscious level that just digs things out of us. And
Yeah.
those are really the things that make us unhealthy from the view of, energetic and spiritual healers. Those are the things that make us physically unhealthy. Those are the things that make us attract the challenges of our lives to us, and negative experiences to us, people that really, really challenge us. It's all there to get you to deal with your emotions.
Yeah. Well, might be a good segue into like our second topic a little bit, as to like why some issues resolve with like energy work just kind of like at a flip of a switch. Others take time, and others might not necessarily like work through energy work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have a lot of thoughts on that. Do you want to start off, or do you want me to jump in?
I'm just thinking of like, so some of over like the last 8 years is like, as I've gotten deeper into the world of like plant medicines and like indigenous healings and then acupuncture and just kind of like blending it all together. It's the way I see it is it's definitely a multi-layered and a multifaceted approach. And because you can address things from like the physical level or the etheric level, and then you have the emotional level, the mental level, then the spiritual level, depending on what kind of like degree of our field, from like the least density in our field to like the densest of like down to our like bones basically.
Mm-hmm.
So certain things, like at least from my experience and some of the trainings that I've been through, like oftentimes if things are relatively new, like we're just starting to like experience like tensions or like emotional upset, oftentimes like things that are easy to clear might just need to be cleared from the emotional body, because it's like this kind of like, best way to describe it might just be like a gray blob in our field, so to speak, that's causing stagnation, which then presses down into the etheric level and like into the body. So we have like a little bit of an ache, is like, what's the emotion associated with this? So it's like, if we can just clear the emotional level, oftentimes those sensations might resolve themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if something like progresses and becomes more chronic, that's when we say it gets like a little bit deeper, and then it kind of like manifests more into like a deeper layer of ourselves and like into the physical level. So in terms of energy work, the way I see it, it's kind of like, if we do our homework and kind of like keep ourselves clear, oftentimes like energy work and just kind of like general maintenance work, like for health in general, like exercise, don't let yourself get stagnant and like sit on the couch for 40 years. Like if we can do our base work, oftentimes a lot of the stuff will just like either clear out on its own, or just like with a little bit of a nudge.
Mm-hmm.
Other things, I feel like when they've gotten so deep and chronic, our body holds them, and like then the energy level holds them, and then our mental body holds them, because we start identifying with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, when it gets to that point, that's where I personally see that you need a multi-layered approach, and where the full spectrum of tools are valid to use. Like, I'm totally an advocate for like Western medicine. Like when you need to, is like, if you break an arm, is like, you're not going to go to your acupuncturist, is like you're going to go to the emergency room and get that casted.
Yeah.
So it's like, the way I see it, like everything is our tool and it has its place in the toolkit. And I personally like to address it from as many different angles as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, I think everything has a presence on every level, right? So your shoulder pain has an emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental, level to it. And if it's not that big a pain, you can kind of, it really, the emotional, I feel, is how we experience the totality of it. So I think if you deal with this shoulder pain, for example, on an emotional layer, then that can really resolve quickly. But then, like you said, with the more chronic stuff, the deeper, the more serious stuff, it manifests more strongly because it is more important, and manifests at certain times, because you're able to deal with it at that time. I could be just like the most optimistic person in the world, but I don't think we're really presented with any challenges that we can't theoretically overcome. There are boundaries in the physical world that we all abide by, right? So if you get a fatal injury, right, then you can't do anything about that, right? Um, but but again, if you dig really deep into the symbology, I mean, some people believe that like the body is a map for symbology, and like, why do you stub your big toe instead of your, I don't know, your second toe, right? The big toe represents the father and the second toe represents the mother, right? So if you hurt your big toe, it has something to do with your father. Some people go that far. I don't know if it's necessary to go that far, but there's just really a lot hinged on your courageously facing up to whatever it is that you're afraid of. Yeah, I mean, to to really be guided by your fear and your healing. That's what you're doing. So
But
energy work.
you mean like leaning into the fear at times when it's like there's something here, I'm kind of scared of it, I don't know if I need to go like look at that skeleton in the closet.
Yeah, exactly. And if the thought pops up in your head, oh, I wonder if that skeleton. We all have a lot of skeletons, right? And I wonder why that skeleton just popped up into my head at 1:30 in the afternoon on a Friday, right? Go and look at that. And you have a tremendous opportunity for healing by standing up to those things which you avoid. And if you don't, then that it's kind of like the reverse law of attraction, right? Or I guess it is just the law of attraction, right? If you let that sit there, that feeling that you're pretending you're not having, that's in your attractive field. That's attracting things to you. So courageously standing up to the pains of your life is kind of the only way to have them resolve, and there's this, a lot of us have a built-in resistance to doing that because we're really like eye on the prize. I just want things to be nice. I just want things to be happy. And I guess the encouraging point there is they become more happy and better when you face up to those things, after you face up to those. And through that, because if you feel unhappy because of something that happened to you when you were 7, right, then you're allowing unhappiness in your life. If you go back and you let yourself feel that fully, then you don't have that unhappiness that you're carrying with you, and then things get simpler. I'll give a really like kind of just worlds colliding, physical and emotional world colliding example. So like we had a leak in our bedroom a couple of weeks ago. I think I told you about that. And we've been staying out of the room for fear of mold, and when we go in there, our throats get tight a little bit. And so our perspective on what to do, having dealt with a similar situation in a previous apartment, was let the wall dry out, let there be oxygen in the room, let the mold behind the wall die, let the spores settle, and then clean up the spores to do a really deep clean. So I did that, and I cleaned the room every couple of days, really, just to try to get every nook and cranny. And I was getting frustrated, like, well, it doesn't seem to be getting any better. Why isn't it getting any better? And I realized I was having self-deprecating thoughts about my ability to get that done. I was saying, my guidance said this will all be done in 2 weeks. Well, it's 3 weeks from, and do I get any guidance at all? Am I just lying to myself? Like, and then I did emotional clearing of that. And I revisited some similar feelings I had had about things in the past. And then I walked back into the room and I was like, I haven't cleaned that thing yet. I haven't cleaned around the window yet. An entire area of the room I hadn't cleaned yet, right? And there was a window fan we had been using that was just sitting out in the open, obviously covered in mold spores because all of these mold spores were flowing through.
Yep.
And it was just all right there under my nose. But I had these emotions that were blocking a literal, just simple physical fact from me. So that's the level to which these things can integrate.
So if I heard you correctly, is like you needed to just like be present and like allow the emotions to be, to then have the clarity to see what was right in front of your face.
Exactly, because I had emotional involvement in, well, really in my ability to get results, in my ability to accomplish things that I care about. If it's something that I really want, so then there's a little voice in my head that says, oh, well, maybe you're not good enough to make that happen. If it's something that I want that I need to do something about, maybe you're not doing that right. And so resolving that feeling allowed me to see the simple, super, super simple solution, right?
Totally. And I want to go back to like the part about like leaning into the fear and like when something like that happens. And I totally agree with you about like when something like organically, naturally comes up, like to have the courage to either like look at it, take a step forward, and like actually see what's there. But I also want to like, because I feel like if by just avoiding it like over and over and over is like that doesn't actually serve us, and like it might be a little bit of like spiritual bypassing because you don't want to like be uncomfortable for maybe a couple minutes, a couple hours a day or whatever. And for myself, every time that I've done that, like it's resulted in positive benefits. And with that being said, I also personally, like if something naturally arises, I'll look at it. But I'm at the point now where like I've seen myself like in my early years of like my spiritual path and like waking up is like it was almost like there was a hunt, like what's the next thing I have to fix? Like, is there more? Like, let's go hunting for like the demons in the closets. And it was like after a while, I was like, that doesn't actually serve me, because like if you want to like continue to do that, you can always find another thing to like quote unquote like work on or heal or whatever. It's almost, I actually spoke with a friend recently that kind of used the language of like it's a healing addiction at a
Yeah.
certain point, is like thinking of like you're you're chasing your own tail at points. So just to have the discernment when something is naturally arising for ourselves to look at, in terms of like energy work or like physical healing and everything else, is like by all means look at it. But I think it becomes a little bit unhealthy at times when we're always looking for the next thing to fix.
Yes, and also a little a pro and counterpoint simultaneously.
Yeah.
The pattern when you get it, because I've been in that pattern before, and where I'm like, well, I'm doing all this digging, I'm looking around, and nothing's working. That was a self-deprecating thought, and actually, that was a signal that self-deprecation was what was on my mind.
Yeah.
So and so the agreement with your point is you can't do too much, right? There is such a thing as too much. Sorry, there is such a thing as too much. You can go too far. You can spend way too much of your time on this stuff, right? At the end of the day, there's stuff that you're really here to do, that you want to be doing. There's work that you want to do. I think it's easiest to get stuck in that loop kind of behavior when, well, I think a lot of healers get into this, and we talked a little bit about this point before, and we were thinking about saving it for next time. But particularly when you are a service-oriented person, when your life tasks have to do with healing and helping others, you almost can't get started on that until you have resolved a lot of your major things, and you've gained a comfort with your trajectory. It's not about healing everything for yourself. I don't know if there is such a thing. Probably not. There are probably certain things that are part of our limitations that never go away. But gaining a level of comfort of I am enough. I've healed enough. I can relax.
Totally.
Yeah, you need that, and you need to get there. Otherwise, your healing for others won't be as impactful, because your healing for others will carry those pains with you.
Exactly. Like that's why, in terms of like the coaching work and also like the spiritual, like healing work that I do, is like the clearing work that I do. Like I won't be able to work with something with a client or like be a clearing for them if I haven't either like cleared it for myself or am far enough along where I've either experienced or worked with it a little bit to like have a little bit of an understanding. It's like the work we do is the clearing for our clients. So I totally agree with that. And I think in terms of like healings and like working with other healers, so to speak, is like, I think it's important to also like pay attention to does somebody have like the blessing of their elders, the blessing of their teachers to do this work as well? Because I feel like, especially early on, it's like super easy to be like, when we get cracked open to spirit and like have all these awakenings and like this process is like, I'm meant to go save the world. And like, oftentimes it's like, that's a lot of people's first reaction. That was like, we get super eager. And I know I did for a little bit. It was like, oh my God, like the world is totally different now. So, but to have like the humility to like actually be present to like what our limitations are and like what can we actually work with.
Sorry, you broke up there a little bit on the last sentence.
Being present to like what we can do, like what we can't do, and just like being humble to the fact and like acknowledging where we actually are.
Yeah, it's like a almost Buddhist level of detachment, right? It's accepting that everything that's happening to everyone is a totally subjective experience, and you're a force that helps others progress, but you're not rewriting their story, and you may play a role in them opening up to whatever their next phase is. And it sometimes almost seems accidental, and it almost sometimes I feel like, well, what am I actually doing if all of this is just sort of totally subjective, right? But then that's the same question as like, why are we even here? And what's the point in asking that question? We're here. So it's like giving up control over what happens in the healing. And that's the hollow bone idea again, which I think we talked about a little bit last time. There's the healer, and the source. And the healer doesn't really do that much of the work, but it's a very necessary function, because you open up the channel to this person who otherwise might not have or wouldn't have that access to that source. And different healers work with different sources, so maybe that's part of it. We talked about the Michael teachings. The Michael entity is like my main guide and companion, and when I do healing, he's the source for a lot of that healing, unless someone's ancestor wants to step in, or sometimes a living person's essence will step in and subconsciously be part of that. I've had that happen too. But usually it's, the sources that I work with trying to reach the people that I'm going to come into contact with. And I mean, we're delivering messages, we're helping them do physical iterations. And I really feel like it feels different every single person I work on. It feels totally different. And I'm at a point now where I just open up the channel and observe. And sometimes what happens in my sessions is like, if someone's resisting or someone has a resistance, it's like a particularly hard place for them to open up and examine emotionally. I'll be prompted to ask them like, oh, what happened when you were this many years old or whatever. And then usually there's something concrete there that they instantly identify, and then they get in touch with those feelings, and then we clear those. But what of that is coming from me? I don't know. I guess it's like, I love thinking about the metaphysical unseen world. How does all of this work? How does energy work? But all the purpose of those studies that I've done for me has been just satisfying my curiosity to the point where I could just say, okay, well, there's too much. I can only think. I'm a consciousness. I can only think of one thing at a time. You can't understand this unless you can think of everything at one time. I can't do that, so I'll just let it happen and get out of the way.
That'd be a nice superpower.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. I don't think we would be here if we could do that.
I want to just share something like kind of like a little like just kind of like right specifically towards like the question of like why some things resolve with energy work and others don't. And you may have a similar experience. To me, it seems like oftentimes working with patients or clients is like sometimes like you have to do a lot of like work over time. Like there's a saying that I like from one of my friends that I've worked with is like healing can happen in an instant or it can take a super long time. Or then it's something that can take a long time and it can also happen in an instant. Um, and I think it really just depends as to like where a person is in their own journey is like, are they willing and able to have that kind of light switch moment where everything clicks and shifts? Um, and with some of my patients, it seems like maybe 1 out of like 10 or so is like they're ready to have that moment. So like when they get on the table for acupuncture, their issue just like almost seems to be like miraculously like disappeared like that day, and like it may come back in a couple of weeks, but like a tenth of what it is. And some people is like it's very noticeable and like a subtle like improvement over time. But I'm curious, is like, what's your experience like working with your clients? Like, is there basically a ratio of like, what's your like miracle to like effort ratio?
Yeah, it's totally subjective. It's totally case by case. Yeah, and literally for both physical and emotional issues, like some people, I've had one guy come to me from India actually, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I have tons of anger," and we did one session, and he emailed me. He was like, "Wow, like most of my anger is gone. I don't feel angry at all." I'm like, "Wow, that's great." I had a session where it was a mother who had an 11-year-old daughter came to me and was like, "Oh, me and my daughter have been growing apart. And, I know she's going through some developmental tough things. But could we do a session and work on her?" And I said, sure. And she emailed me like 3 hours after the session, like my daughter just hugged me. She just walked up out of nowhere and just hugged me for no reason. And she hasn't done that in like 5 years. I'm like, oh, you know? So
Nice.
on that, yeah, it was a really nice thing to hear. I have some clients too will come to me like with a physical issue, right? Someone who had like UTIs, almost chronic UTIs for like 10 years, and two or three sessions stopped having them, right? And I have a client who hasn't been working with me for 12 years, but really has been on a major healing path, like really aggressive, and like and just really focus. His fundamental energy level is not increased yet. So there's really, it's really subjective. It's just really, really, really subjective. I see physical issues resolving as like maybe like almost like a happy coincidence, right? And it's about the client subjective experience. If they're coming to you with a specific ailment, and then you work together and that resolves, it's it's not quite coincidence, because that was the physical reflection of what was energetically and emotionally ready to resolve for them, and that's why that was the thing that was top of mind. But you can't just say, I'm going to fix every part of my body with energy work. I'm going to grow a foot taller because I supported myself energetically to do that, right? We don't have control over what the result is, but I see it as a way of encouraging people along to the next progression of their path. And you can get into the illusion of control, because it does happen frequently enough that you see issues resolve like that, or resolve in 5 sessions or something like that. It can reinforce that illusion, but it is an illusion. You know, and this kind of gets into my philosophy on the way the law of attraction really works, right? The law of attraction in my mind is not, I want to make $1 million. I think about $1 million every day and then you make $1 million. To me, the law of attraction is, if you be yourself to your highest and best form, everything that you want will happen, whether it's your conscious or subconscious ones, right? Really more your subconscious ones. Like you can't say, I'm going to make X number of dollars, but you could say, I struggle with money. That's one of my lessons. Let me get over the emotions related to money, and then I'll have enough money for the rest of my life, and in various forms, right? You know, maybe there's like one in like, 300 million people that will win the lottery because you do a session with them, and but that's, you can't say I'm going to use energy work to increase my chances of winning the lottery. There's that, you don't have that level of control, but you have the ability to maximize to get to the best possible in your own subjective path, and the best possible in anyone's own subjective path involves peace and harmony and really, really working productively in some way, doing what you want to do and having that not have to be tied to money, or having that tied to enough money for you to be happy. It establishes happiness, helps you get out of your own way, so to speak.
Yeah, just coming from that, like, this is what I see is like coming from that place of like peace and gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, sweet. I think we, according to the clock, maybe been going for close to about an hour or 40 minutes. Do you have any last words for this recording, or do you think that's a good spot to leave off today?
No, well, I had no idea that much time passed. My joke in every Zoom webinar I'm on to my teachers is always like, you're really lucky you have a mute button for me.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, guys, just like last time, please feel free to leave any comments like down below, or direct message either of us if you're seeing this on Facebook or anywhere else. We'd be happy to address any of them. And I guess we'll see what sort of feedback we get, what topics come up for the next one, and see what we can address next week.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Thanks so much, Matt.
All right. Good talking to you, and thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.